The sun beat down on Redemption, Arizona, relentless and unforgiving, baking the dust into the very souls of its inhabitants. It was a town that time seemed to have forgotten, a place where grit and gunpowder were the primary currencies, and a woman in a position of authority was as rare as a cool breeze. Sheriff Evelyn Evie Reed, however, was determined to change that perception. Her bright red lipstick, a splash of defiant color against the muted tones of the dusty frontier, was often the first thing people noticed, followed closely by the glint of the silver star pinned to her vest. Evie had inherited the badge and the responsibilities that came with it from her father, a man whose gruff exterior hid a heart as kind as the oasis that fed Redemption. His sudden passing had left a void, not just in the sheriff's office, but in the heart of the town. Evie, a woman accustomed to the more refined society of the East Coast, found herself thrust into a world of saloons, salutes, and the ever-present scent of horse sweat and cheap whiskey. The townsfolk, a hardened bunch who had seen their fair share of lawmen come and go, regarded her with a mixture of curiosity and thinly veiled amusement. The Cowboys, swaggering with their spurs and disdain, often greeted her with a patronizing nod or a snicker behind cupped hands. "Looky here, boys," one drawled, his voice thick with a mocking southern accent. "The new sheriff's got her war paint on." Laughter, rough and uninhibited, echoed through the dusty street. Evie felt the sting of their judgment, the weight of their doubt pressing down on her like the oppressive heat. But beneath the veneer of her carefully applied makeup and her prim, tailored attire, a fire burned. Her father had taught her well, instilling in her a sense of justice and a keen eye for detail. She might not have the calloused hands of a seasoned rancher, but she had a mind that could outwit the sharpest outlaw and a spirit that refused to be broken. Her first day in office was a testament to the challenges ahead. A drunken brawl erupted outside the saloon, a regular occurrence, but this time it was directed at her. Two burly men, emboldened by alcohol and their own machinations, stumbled towards her, their faces contorted with aggression. "Get out of here, little lady," one slurred. "This town ain't for pretty faces." Evie stood her ground, her hand hovering over the worn leather of her holster. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the deafening silence that had fallen over the street. She met his gaze, her blue eyes, usually sparkling with warmth, now sharp and unwavering. "This town," she stated, her voice surprisingly steady, "is under my protection, and you gentlemen are under arrest." The unexpected firmness in her tone, coupled with the undeniable authority in her stance, momentarily stunned them. Before they could retaliate, a deep, resonant voice cut through the air. "Leave the lady be." Turning, Evie saw him then. Tall and broad-shouldered, silhouetted against the harsh glare of the sun, stood Jedediah Stone. He was a man of few words, a man of the land, his weathered face etched with the stories of countless seasons spent under the open sky. His eyes, the color of storm clouds, held a quiet intensity that both intrigued and unnerved her. He was a presence that commanded respect, a stark contrast to the boisterous, often crude men who populated Redemption. The two brawlers, recognizing Stone's authority, grumbled and retreated, disappearing back into the shadows of the saloon. Evie let out a slow breath, her hand finally dropping from her holster. She met Jedediah's gaze, a silent acknowledgement passing between them. It was a look that spoke of shared understanding, of unspoken challenges, and perhaps of something more. In that moment, amidst the dust and the doubt, Evie Reed felt a flicker of hope. The road ahead would be arduous, but she was no longer entirely alone. The incident at the saloon, while a small victory, did little to quell the underlying skepticism toward Sheriff Reed. The Cowboys continued their taunts, their jokes about her lipstick and skirts becoming a daily soundtrack to her life. But Evie, bolstered by Jedediah Stone's quiet support, began to implement her father's methods, combined with her own keen observations. She spent her days studying her father's case files, familiarizing herself with the town's routines and learning the names and faces of its inhabitants. Her attention was increasingly drawn to a series of livestock disappearances that had plagued the ranches on the outskirts of Redemption. Cattle, the lifeblood of the region, were vanishing without a trace, leaving behind bewildered ranchers and mounting financial losses. The whispers started, whispers of a phantom, a cunning rustler known only as the Serpent. "He's a ghost, Sheriff," declared Old Man Hemlock, his voice raspy with age and worry as he reported the loss of a dozen prime steers from his spread. "Never seen, never heard, just gone." Evie listened intently, her pen scratching across the ledger. She noted the locations of the thefts, the types of cattle taken, and the methods, or lack thereof, employed by the Serpent. There were no broken fences, no bloodstains, no telltale tracks that her father's experienced eye would have readily spotted. It was as if the cattle had simply dissolved into the desert air. Jedediah Stone, whose own ranch, the Horizon, lay some miles west of town, was also a victim. A week prior, 20 of his best heifers had vanished. He arrived at Evie's office, his usual stoic demeanor tinged with a grim frustration. "They were moved without a sound, Sheriff," he stated, his gaze fixed on the maps spread across her desk. "No sign of struggle, no broken gates. Whoever this Serpent is, he's good. Too good." Evie studied Jedediah. His ranch was known for its superior stock, and the loss was a significant blow. Yet he spoke with a controlled anger, not despair. "The Serpent is careful," Evie mused, tracing a finger across the map, "but no one is invisible. There must be a pattern, a weakness." She decided to visit the ranches herself to see the evidence firsthand. She rode out with Jedediah, the vast, unforgiving landscape stretching out before them. The silence of the desert was broken only by the rhythmic beat of their horses' hooves and the mournful cry of a hawk circling overhead. As they rode, Jedediah shared his knowledge of the land, pointing out hidden springs and treacherous ravines. Evie, in turn, asked insightful questions, her sharp mind piecing together the fragmented clues. At Hemlock's ranch, Evie examined the empty pasture. She noticed a faint disturbance in the dust, a subtle scuff mark near a cluster of rocks that Jedediah had initially overlooked. "This looks like a drag mark," she pointed out, "but incredibly faint, as if something heavy was pulled very carefully." Later, at another ranch, she observed a similar, almost imperceptible disturbance leading away from the fence line, disappearing into a dense thicket of mesquite. "He's using the terrain to his advantage," she realized, leading them through areas where tracks would be erased by wind and natural debris. As they rode back to Redemption, the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple. A sense of unease settled over Evie. The Serpent was not just a thief, he was a phantom who moved with a chilling efficiency, a shadow that preyed on the vulnerability of the frontier. The smiles and jeers of the Cowboys seemed trivial now, mere distractions from the real danger that lurked in the vast, untamed wilderness. She knew, with a certainty that chilled her to the bone, that her father's legacy and the safety of Redemption rested squarely on her shoulders. And this Serpent, whoever he was about to find out that Sheriff Evie Reed was far more than just a woman with painted lips. The days that followed were a blur of riding, observing, and relentless investigation. Evie, with Jedediah's tacit assistance, began to piece together the Serpent's modus operandi. He was a master of stealth, utilizing the natural landscape to mask his movements. The missing cattle were not being driven in herds, but seemingly guided individually or in small groups through the least visible routes, often at night. This suggested a lone operator or a very small, disciplined group, and an intimate knowledge of the surrounding territories. The townsfolk, however, remained a formidable obstacle. Their ingrained sexism meant they were more inclined to believe the tall tales of a supernatural thief than the methodical deductions of a woman sheriff. "A ghost, I tell you," declared Silas Croft, a gruff rancher whose pride had been wounded by the loss of his prize bull. "No man could do what he's doing. It's the work of the devil himself, or some such varmint from the spirit world." Evie listened patiently, her jaw tight. "Mr. Croft," she began, her voice calm but firm. "The devil, as you call him, leaves no boot prints. This thief does. He's just very good at hiding them." Her efforts were met with eye rolls and muttered asides. The Cowboys, in particular, seemed to relish her struggles, their mockery growing bolder. One afternoon, while Evie was questioning a stable hand about recent horse rentals, a group of them rode by, their laughter sharp. "Careful, Sheriff!" one of them shouted. "Don't want to get your pretty dress dirty with all this detective work." Evie ignored them, her focus unwavering. She knew that proving herself to these men would be as challenging as catching the serpent. Jedediah, though he rarely intervened directly, was a constant, reassuring presence. He would often arrive at the sheriff's office just as she was preparing to ride out, offering a nod of encouragement or a practical suggestion about the terrain. His quiet confidence was a balm to her frayed nerves. One evening, as Evie sat poring over her father's maps, Jedediah appeared at her door, a rare smile gracing his lips. "I think I might have a lead, Sheriff," he said, his voice low. "My foreman, a man named Reyes, has been working with some of the smaller ranchers along the northern border. He mentioned some unusual activity, strange campfires seen at a distance, just beyond the usual trails, and a peculiar scent carried on the wind, something metallic, he said." Evie's eyes widened. A metallic scent? It was a strange detail, but in the absence of any other tangible evidence, it was a thread to pull. "Where exactly, Jedediah?" she asked, her voice filled with a renewed sense of purpose. "Near the old abandoned silver mine, about a day's ride north," he replied. "It's treacherous country. Not many go there, and Reyes said he saw signs of cattle being moved very carefully in that direction." The abandoned silver mine. It was a place steeped in local lore, a reminder of a boom and bust era that had left behind only ghosts and collapsed tunnels. It was also a perfect hiding place, remote and inaccessible. Evie felt a prickle of excitement mixed with apprehension. This could be it, the serpent's lair. "We'll ride out at dawn," she declared, her gaze meeting Jedediah's. "You and I." Jedediah nodded, his storm-cloud eyes holding a glint of shared determination. As he turned to leave, he paused. "Sheriff," he said, his voice softer now, "be careful. This serpent, he's not just cunning, he's dangerous." Evie met his gaze, her lipstick a bold crimson against the dim lamplight. "I know, Jedediah," she replied, her voice unwavering, "but so am I." The whispers in the wind had led them to a dangerous path, and Evie was ready to follow it, no matter where it led. The dawn broke with a fiery intensity, painting the sky in hues of rose and gold as Evie and Jedediah rode north. The air was crisp and cool, a welcome respite from the midday heat, but a palpable tension hung between them. Evie, dressed in practical riding attire, her badge prominent, felt a surge of adrenaline mixed with a healthy dose of apprehension. The abandoned silver mine was known to be a treacherous place, riddled with unstable shafts and hidden ravines. Jedediah, his movements fluid and assured on his horse, rode slightly ahead, his keen eyes scanning the rugged terrain. He pointed out the subtle signs of passage: a snapped twig, a faint scuff mark on a rock, a patch of disturbed earth that only an experienced tracker would notice. Evie, her own senses heightened, absorbed every detail, filing it away in her mind. As they approached the area around the mine, the landscape grew more desolate. The scrubby vegetation gave way to stark rock formations, and the gaping maw of the mine entrance, a dark wound in the side of the mountain. A faint, acrid smell, metallic and faintly coppery, hung in the air. "Reyes was right," Evie murmured, wrinkling her nose. "That smell, it's strong here." Jedediah dismounted, his hand on his rifle. "The cattle trails lead this way," he said, his voice a low growl. "But they've been cleverly disguised. He's been leading them through narrow crevices where the wind and dust would cover any tracks." They cautiously approached the mine entrance. The darkness within was absolute, a suffocating presence that seemed to swallow the light. Evie drew her pistol, its cool weight a comforting reassurance in her hand. "Stay alert, Jedediah," she whispered, her voice barely audible. They ventured inside, their horses left tethered outside. The air grew colder, heavier. The beam of Evie's lantern cut through the oppressive blackness, revealing rotting timbers, discarded tools, and the skeletal remains of mining carts. The metallic scent was overpowering now, mingled with the musty odor of damp earth and decay. As they navigated deeper into the labyrinthine tunnels, they heard it, a faint, rhythmic clanking, followed by the lowing of cattle. It was undeniable. The serpent's lair. They moved with extreme caution, their footsteps muffled by the debris on the floor. The clanking grew louder, and then, through a narrow opening in the rock face, they saw them. A herd of cattle, miraculously unharmed, were milling about in a large cavern, and tending to them with a surprising gentleness was a figure cloaked in shadow. The figure turned, revealing a lean, wiry man with sharp, intelligent eyes that glinted in the lantern light. He was not the brute Evie might have expected, but someone with a certain refined aura, incongruous with the act of rustling. He held a metal rod, which he was using to tap on the livestock's flanks, creating a low, resonant sound. The metallic scent, Evie realized. It's from this rod. He's using some kind of tool to keep them quiet, to herd them without a sound. "Who are you?" Evie demanded, stepping into the cavern, her pistol aimed steadily. The man didn't flinch. A slow, enigmatic smile spread across his face. "They call me the Serpent," he replied, his voice smooth and cultured, a stark contrast to the rough environment. "And you, Sheriff, are a most unexpected surprise." Jedediah moved to Evie's side, his rifle now trained on the man. "It's over," he said, his voice firm. The Serpent's eyes flickered between Evie and Jedediah, a calculating gleam in them. He held no weapon in his hands, yet there was an air of coiled danger about him. Evie felt a shiver of premonition. This was no ordinary confrontation. This was a man who had mastered the shadows, and he was not about to surrender them easily. The Serpent, whose real name Evie would later learn was Silas Vance, was not a man to be underestimated. Confronted in his makeshift lair, surrounded by the stolen cattle, he did not panic. Instead, a chilling calm settled over him. "Over?" he echoed, his smile widening. "My dear Sheriff, this is merely the beginning." Evie, her finger steady on the trigger, warned, "Don't try anything, Vance." Vance chuckled, a dry, rustling sound like leaves skittering across dry ground. "And what, pray tell, do you think I can do? I have no weapon, no escape route, and you have the advantage of surprise." He gestured with the metallic rod he still held. "This little contraption," he explained, "is rather remarkable. It emits a frequency that calms the cattle, making them docile. A far cry from the usual brute force employed by those who would steal them." Jedediah shifted his weight, his eyes narrowed, but he remained silent, allowing Evie to take the lead. "You've been stealing from ranchers all over the territory," Evie stated, her voice hard. "Why?" Vance's smile softened, taking on a melancholic air. "Necessity, Sheriff, and a certain artistic satisfaction. The challenge of it. These vast lands, so easily preyed upon, so poorly protected. It demands a certain finesse, wouldn't you agree?" He looked at Jedediah. "And you, Mr. Stone, a man of property, you understand the value of what you protect, do you not? And perhaps the vulnerability that comes with it." Evie felt a flicker of unease. Vance seemed to be trying to gauge Jedediah, to probe for weaknesses. She glanced at Jedediah, his face unreadable, but his stance was one of unwavering support. Suddenly, Vance made his move. It wasn't an aggressive one, but a calculated diversion. He casually dropped the metallic rod, which clattered loudly on the cavern floor. As Evie and Jedediah instinctively flinched, Vance lunged towards a precarious pile of loose rocks near the cavern entrance. With a surprising burst of strength, he shoved them, sending a cascade of stones tumbling down the main tunnel. The noise was deafening, echoing through the cavern and creating a disorienting rumble. Dust and debris filled the air, momentarily obscuring their vision. "Now!" Vance yelled, his voice muffled by the dust, and he disappeared into one of the side tunnels, moving with astonishing speed. Evie coughed, waving away the dust. "Jedediah! He's gone!" Jedediah, his eyes sharp, pointed to a narrow opening in the wall. "That way! He's heading deeper into the mine." They pursued him, but the rockfall had created a significant impediment. Evie's lantern beam barely penetrated the thick haze. They found Vance's dropped rod, the metallic scent still strong, but the man himself had vanished into the subterranean darkness. The cattle, startled by the commotion, were now agitated, their lowing echoing eerily through the cavern. Frustrated but undeterred, Evie knew they couldn't pursue him indefinitely into the unstable mine. "We have to get the cattle out," she declared, her voice raspy. "They're valuable, and the ranchers need them back." Jedediah nodded grimly. "I'll try to herd them towards the entrance. You should head back to town, Sheriff. Alert the deputies. We'll need help moving them." As they began the arduous task of coaxing the frightened cattle towards the mine entrance, Evie couldn't shake the feeling that Vance's escape was part of a larger plan. He had not fought them. He had not even attempted to resist. He had merely vanished. And the way he had looked at Jedediah, the subtle probing in his words, lingered in her mind. The serpent was a puzzle, and Evie was determined to solve him, even if it meant venturing deeper into the darkness he called home. The return to redemption was somber. Evie and Jedediah, along with the recovered herd, arrived back in town under the watchful eyes of the townsfolk. The successful cattle recovery did little to dispel the air of mystery surrounding the serpent. The fact that he had escaped so easily only fueled the sensational tales. "He's a ghost, I tell you," Silas Croft insisted. "He vanished like smoke. Only a spirit could do that." Evie, weary but resolute, countered, "Mr. Croft, spirits don't leave boot prints and they don't steal cattle. Vance is a man, and he's still out there, and he'll be back." The rescued cattle were returned, and a fragile sense of relief settled over the ranches. The incident had highlighted the community's vulnerability. Evie found herself spending more time with Jedediah, not just as a law officer and concerned citizen, but as two people who had faced a genuine threat together. Jedediah, usually a man of few words, began to open up. He spoke of growing up on the unforgiving plains and the loneliness that had shaped him. He revealed a deep desire for justice and a quiet anger towards those who preyed on the weak. Evie, in turn, shared her anxieties, her fears of not living up to her father's legacy, and the constant pressure of proving herself in a man's world. Their conversations, often held under the star-strewn sky, forged a bond. The romantic tension simmering between them began to blossom. One evening, as they sat outside the sheriff's office, Jedediah gently took Evie's hand. His touch was warm, his grip firm. "You're doing a fine job, Evie," he said, his voice a low rumble. "Your father would be proud, and so am I." Evie's heart swelled. In his eyes she saw not doubt but admiration. In his touch she felt a sense of belonging she hadn't realized she craved. Her bright lipstick and tailored dresses were still part of her. But beneath them, a different kind of strength was growing, nurtured by the rugged landscape and the steady presence of Jedediah Stone. Their budding romance did not go unnoticed. The townsfolk, always eager for gossip, began to whisper. The Cowboys, who had once mocked Evie, now watched her with grudging respect. Some even offered unsolicited advice on handling Vance, their bravado now tinged with a genuine concern. However, their peace was soon shattered. News arrived from a neighboring town of a series of daring bank robberies, executed with the same stealth and precision as the cattle rustling. The description of the perpetrator, a lean man who moved with uncanny agility, sent a shiver down Evie's spine. The serpent was expanding his territory and his methods. Evie knew Vance's escape from the mine was not a mere act of evasion. It had been a deliberate choice, a strategic withdrawal. He was observing, learning, and preparing for his next move. She suspected his ultimate target might be closer than anyone imagined. The fragile peace they had fought to protect was about to be tested once more. And this time, the stakes would be far higher than just a herd of cattle. The bank robberies put Redemption on high alert. Evie told Jedediah the mine was a test. Now he's going for bigger game. This is about power. They reviewed the reports, noting a pattern of speed and an almost supernatural ability to disappear. Evie also discovered a key detail: small crafted tools left at the crime scenes, which she believed were from the mine. Jedediah proposed a trap, convinced Vance would target Redemption next. Evie agreed, deputizing townsfolk and mapping out potential routes. They decided to ambush him along the old stagecoach road. As dusk fell, a figure appeared on the horizon. It was Vance, but he was walking, not riding, and carrying a large canvas-wrapped object. He was heading for the center of town, not the bank. Vance walked directly to the sheriff's office, openly carrying a bulky package. Evie and Jedediah, bewildered, watched him approach. He set the package down, addressed Evie and Jedediah, and then vanished into a nearby alley. Evie cautiously opened the canvas to find not stolen goods, but a collection of intricate wooden carvings, including a miniature of her father. A note was tucked inside, signed The Serpent. The message explained that his actions were not about theft, but about challenging a corrupt system and forcing the town to see the light that Evie represented. He praised her leadership, stating she was the true law, not just the badge. The townsfolk, confused but in awe, now saw Evie as a true leader, and the Serpent's legacy became one of mystery and strange admiration. Vance's departure left Redemption in a state of reflection. The townsfolk, their fear replaced by respect, now saw Evie as a leader. Even Silas Croft, the most vocal skeptic, apologized. Evie realized Vance had forced the community to confront its prejudices. She placed the carving of her father on her desk, acknowledging her legacy while forging her own path. Her romance with Jedediah deepened, a testament to their shared experiences. He confessed that she was the steady hand he never knew he needed. Their peace, however, was fragile. Other outlaws, emboldened by the Serpent's apparent success, began to test Redemption. Evie knew Vance's departure was not the end. She spent her days strengthening the town's defenses and training deputies. When a traveler reported a new, brutal gang, Evie knew her work was just beginning. A brutal gang led by Grit Callahan became a persistent threat. Evie knew a confrontation was inevitable. She and Jedediah rallied the community, preparing for the clash. The town's defense was built on the now loyal Cowboys. Callahan's gang rode into Redemption, but they were met by a united front led by Evie, her lipstick a defiant crimson. The battle was fierce, but Evie, moving with deadly precision, directed her forces. Jedediah fought ferociously, protecting the townsfolk. Callahan charged Evie, but with a swift move she shot and disabled his horse, sending him to the ground. Seeing their leader fall, the gang scattered. As the dust settled, the victorious townsfolk cheered Evie's name. Jedediah rode up, his eyes shining with pride. Evie looked out at the town and felt a profound sense of respect. She had faced down the Serpent and the wolves, proving herself the true guardian of Redemption. The town began rebuilding, stronger than ever. The Crimson Trail, once a symbol of her defiance, now represented the brave path she had forged. Under her leadership, Redemption faced its future with hope and resilience.